That Tuesday evening in October, the betrayal didn't announce itself with fanfare. It slipped into my chest like a cold blade. Right there in the middle of the Fairmont Royal York's Grand Ballroom in downtown Toronto, while 250 people toasted a man who had spent the last decade erasing me from our shared history. I stood near the bar, nursing a glass of water I hadn't asked for, watching Jonathan Westbrook work the room in his custom-made suit from Harry Rosen, the kind that costs more than what I used to pay myself monthly back when we were splitting instant ramen at George Brown College's culinary program. He was 47 minutes into his retirement speech. I had stopped counting at minute 32, but the numbers kept ticking in my head anyway, a habit from 4 decades of precisely timing soufflés and meat temperatures. I want to thank everyone who made Westbrook and Hayes possible. Jonathan's voice boomed through the speakers, smooth as the aged scotch he was drinking. Our loyal patrons, our incredible staff, and of course, the vision that transformed a small bistro into Toronto's premier dining destination. The vision, his vision, apparently. No mention of two 23-year-olds who met during a brutal, stage practical exam in 1984. Both of us sweating over our mission place, both of us dreaming of something bigger than the hotel kitchens that would chew us up and spit us out. No mention of the nights we spent at Tim Hortons on Yonge Street, sketching restaurant layouts on napkins, until the staff kicked us out at closing. No mention of my wife, Catherine, liquidating her RRSP so we could make our first month's rent on that tiny space on Queen Street West. My hip ached. 40 years of standing on kitchen tile, reaching into ovens, hauling 50-pound flour sacks, had reduced my 64-year-old joints to something that clicked and protested with every movement. Jonathan looked like he'd just stepped out of a spa up there. He hadn't worked a service in 12 years. Said his time was better spent on cultivating relationships with investors and media. The applause erupted as he finally stepped down from the podium. That's when Michelle Park, our general manager, approached him with a silver tray. On it sat a leather folder embossed with gold lettering. "Jonathan," she said, her voice bright enough to carry, "the team wanted to commemorate your leadership with something special." He opened it with practiced elegance. I couldn't see from where I stood, but I heard the gasps, the excited murmurs. Someone near me whispered, "Is that what I think it is?" 2-week culinary tour of Lyon and Paris, Michelle announced. First-class accommodations, private tours of 3 Michelin star kitchens. Estimated value, $85,000. The room erupted. Jonathan embraced Michelle. He posed for photographs, the leather folder held up like a trophy. Food critics and restaurant owners crowded around him, everyone wanting to be near Toronto's visionary restaurateur. Then Michelle walked toward me. I straightened, something foolish and hopeful rising in my chest despite everything. 40 years. Surely someone remembered there were 2 signatures on the original lease. Surely someone knew that Westbrook and Hayes meant 2 people. "David," Michelle said, smiling that smile people wear when they're following orders they don't quite agree with. "We didn't forget about you." She handed me an envelope. Not a leather folder, not even a proper card. Just a white envelope you could buy at Staples for pocket change. I opened it there, standing next to the ice sculpture of our restaurant's logo that was slowly melting under the ballroom lights. How fitting. Inside was a $50 gift card to Swiss Chalet, and a note on printer paper. "Thanks for all your hard work in the kitchen over the years. Best wishes in retirement." The team, hard work in the kitchen. I had created 87 dishes that became Toronto dining staples. I had trained 43 chefs who now ran their own establishments across Canada. I had personally negotiated relationships with farmers and suppliers that gave us the edge in an impossible market. I had worked through my mother's death, through 2 knee surgeries, through the 6 months when Catherine was battling breast cancer, and I couldn't afford to miss a single service because payroll was due. And they thanked me for my hard work in the kitchen. I looked up. Across the ballroom, Jonathan caught my eye. He raised his glass of Macallan 25, that leather folder tucked under his arm. He smiled, not apologetic, not guilty. A smile that said he knew exactly what message had been sent. I nodded once, set the Swiss Chalet gift card on the bar next to my untouched water, and walked out of the Fairmont Royal York at exactly 9:12 p.m., while 250 people celebrated a man who had systematically stolen my legacy. The October air hit my face as I stepped onto Front Street. Toronto at night, the CN Tower lit up against the sky, couples walking past toward restaurants, everyone living their normal lives while mine quietly disintegrated. I didn't go home. I couldn't face Catherine yet. She had been so proud tonight, had pressed my suit that morning, had told me how much I deserved to be celebrated. How could I tell her that her husband, the co-founder of one of Toronto's most respected restaurants, had been reduced to a rotisserie chicken gift card? I drove instead. Found myself at the Tim Hortons on Yonge, the same location where Jonathan and I used to dream. I sat in a corner booth with a coffee I paid for with my own debit card, not the gift card, and I stared at the table. That's when my phone buzzed. An email from Patricia Chen, our corporate lawyer. Subject line, urgent. Confidential sale documentation for your review. I opened it. The email had been intended for Jonathan. I was CC'd by mistake. Patricia had written, Jonathan, as discussed, attached are the revised sale documents with David's percentage, adjusted to 12% per our conversation. The buyer is comfortable with this, given his diminished role in operations over the past decade. Please confirm you want to proceed with the January 15 closing date. I read it 4 times. Jonathan was selling the restaurant. Our restaurant, the one we had built from a 20-seat bistro into a dining institution with 3 locations and annual revenue of $12 million. And he was giving me 12%. I pulled out my phone calculator. 12% of what would likely be a $15 to $18 million sale. Let's say $16 million to be conservative. 12% was $1.92 million. That might sound substantial to some people, but I owned 50% of Westbrook and Hayes according to our partnership agreement signed in 1984 at a lawyer's office in a building that's now a Shoppers Drug Mart. 50% of $16 million was $8 million. Jonathan was stealing $6.08 million from me, and he had just made sure I knew it. With that smile and that wave across the ballroom while holding an $85,000 travel package, our staff had probably been pressured to fund. I sat in that Tim Hortons until 1 a.m., reading and rereading that email. The night staff started cleaning around me. I didn't move. Finally, I drove home. Catherine was asleep. I didn't wake her. Instead, I went to my office, the small room at the back of our Leslieville house that still smelled faintly of garlic no matter how many times she aired it out. I pulled out the filing cabinet I hadn't opened in years. Inside were our original documents, the partnership agreement, the incorporation papers, the bank statements from those early years when we were surviving on credit card float, and the generosity of suppliers who believed in us. And there, in a folder I had almost forgotten about, was something Jonathan didn't know I still had. In 1997, when we were planning our second location, we needed a commercial kitchen space for prep and storage. The restaurant couldn't get approved for additional financing fast enough, so I bought the property myself. A 3,000 square foot commercial unit in Scarborough, just off the 401. I took out a second mortgage on our house, Catherine cried when I told her. But she signed the papers anyway because she believed in what we were building. The restaurant had used that kitchen for 27 years. All our prep work happened there. Our catering operation ran from there. Every location's signature dishes started in that kitchen. But legally, that property belonged to David Hayes, private citizen, not Westbrook and Hayes Restaurant Group. The restaurant paid me rent, a modest amount that barely covered my mortgage and property tax. Jonathan had suggested at the time we keep it separate for liability purposes. I had trusted him. Now I understood why he wanted it separate. Because when you sell a restaurant group, you sell its operational assets. And the Scarborough kitchen wasn't a company asset. It was mine. I pulled out the property deed. My name, clear and legal. Then I did something I hadn't done in 40 years. I called in sick. The next morning, while Jonathan was probably planning his lion itinerary, I met with Robert McDonald, a lawyer who specialized in partnership disputes and hospitality industry litigation. I brought every document I owned. How long before the sale closes? Robert asked, spreading papers across his boardroom table in his King Street office. The email said January 15. That's just over 3 months. He nodded, his pen tapping against his legal pad. Here's what we know. You own 50% of Westbrook and Hayes per the original 1,984 partnership agreement. Unless there's been a documented modification you signed, that stands. The fact that he's attempting to close a sale without your approval is already problematic. Can he do it? Can he cut me out? Not legally. But David, I need to ask, have you signed anything in recent years? Any amendments to the partnership structure? Any documents Jonathan presented as routine paperwork? I thought back. There had been things. Annual reviews, tax restructuring documents, insurance policy updates. Had I read everything carefully? I wanted to say yes, but I was honest with myself. I don't know, I admitted. Robert's expression told me that wasn't the answer he wanted. We need to examine every signature you've put on every document for the past 15 years. If he's planning this, he's laid groundwork. People like Jonathan don't make moves like this without legal coverage. I spent the next 4 weeks living 2 lives. During the day, I went to work. I prepped vegetables. I checked inventory. I smiled at Jonathan in the hallways. I even used that Swiss Chalet gift card to buy lunch one day, just to see if he'd notice. He didn't. But every evening, I met with Robert. We reconstructed 40 years of business. Every contract, every signature, every decision we'd made in staff meetings we'd stopped holding because we were too busy running services. The picture that emerged was devastating. For the past 9 years, Jonathan had been systematically repositioning himself as the sole creator of our success. He had trademarked our signature dish names in his name alone. He had formed a catering subsidiary registered solely to him. He had even trademarked our logo, something I assumed we owned jointly, but he'd filed the paperwork himself in 2015. He's been planning this for nearly a decade, Robert said during one late session. This isn't opportunistic. This is calculated. How did I not see it? Because you were cooking, Robert said simply. You were creating menus. You were training staff. You were building the actual product while he was building the appearance of sole ownership. On December 8, Jonathan invited me to lunch. Just the 2 of us at Canoe, the restaurant on the 54th floor of the TD Tower with views across Toronto. David, Jonathan said, cutting into a $68 venison tenderloin, I wanted to discuss an opportunity before things get formal. The sale, I said. He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. You know about that. I was CC'd on Patricia's email. An accident, I assume. His jaw tightened, but he recovered smoothly. Right. Well, then you understand the situation. We have a buyer. Excellent terms. Clean exit for both of us. 12% isn't an exit for me, Jonathan. It's theft. He set down his utensils. David, be realistic. Yes, on paper, you own 50%. But what have you contributed strategically in the past decade? I've been the public face. I've cultivated the media relationships. I've brought in 85% of our investor connections. I've built the brand that makes this sale possible. I've created every menu, trained every chef, maintained every supplier relationship, ensured consistency across 3 locations. Creating isn't the same as building, he said. There's a difference. He leaned forward. Look, I'm being generous with 12%. The buyer doesn't even think your involvement is necessary for the transition. I convinced them to include you out of respect for our history. Our history? 40 years reduced to a footnote worth 12%. No, I said. No deal. I don't approve the sale. Jonathan smiled. It wasn't friendly. David, you don't have approval rights. Check the restructuring documents we signed in 2018. Either partner can authorize a sale with 90-day notice to the other. I gave you that notice at your retirement party. The gift card was just a courtesy. The formal notice will be served next week. Restructuring documents in 2018. The corporate reorganization for tax purposes. I had signed them. I had his word it was routine. I'll fight it, I said. With what? Jonathan finished his wine. Legal fees will destroy you. The sale will proceed. You'll get your 12% and that will be it. Or, he paused, you can accept it gracefully. Take the money Actually retire. Spend time with Catherine. You've earned rest. I stood up, left my untouched plate, and walked out while Jonathan sat there, probably already calculating what he'd do with my $6 million. I called Robert from my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel. He says he has restructuring documents from 2018 that give him unilateral sale authority. Do you remember signing them? No, but that doesn't mean I didn't. Silence on the other end. Then, David, I pulled property records today. The Scarborough Kitchen, your commercial property. What about it? Jonathan filed a claim last month arguing that because the business has used it exclusively for 27 years and paid you rent, the property should transfer to the company through continuous commercial use and integration. It's a reach, but if he can prove the property is functionally inseparable from business operations, a court might rule it belongs to the company. My blood went cold. That property was worth at least $2. $8 million based on recent commercial real estate sales in Scarborough. Can he win? In Ontario? Maybe. 27 years of exclusive use is a strong argument. We'd have to fight it. Everything is a fight now, I said quietly. Yes, Robert agreed. But David, the property is our leverage. Even if his documents hold up, even if he can push through the sale, he needs that kitchen. The buyer is purchasing operational capacity. Without the Scarborough Prep Kitchen, their due diligence falls apart. I looked out at Toronto's skyline from the parking garage. All those buildings, all those restaurants. Somewhere in one of them, Jonathan was probably celebrating, telling himself he'd won. What do I do? We remove his leverage, Robert said. Then we show him what happens when you try to erase the person who created the actual food that made your reputation. On December 20, I did 3 things. First, I formally filed opposition to the sale, regardless of what documents Jonathan thought he had. I was on record as refusing any transaction that undervalued my contribution. Second, I filed a lawsuit for partnership dissolution, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. If Jonathan wanted to sell, we'd do it properly, with proper valuation and proper division. Third, and most importantly, I went to the Scarborough Kitchen at 5 a.m. and posted eviction notices. As the legal owner of the property, I was terminating the restaurant group's lease effective February 1. 60 days notice. Every piece of equipment, every freezer, every prep station had to be removed. The buyer was conducting their due diligence. They were touring facilities. They were reviewing operational infrastructure. And in 6 weeks, we wouldn't have a prep kitchen. Jonathan called me at 6:47 that morning. I was at Tim Hortons again, same booth, watching my phone light up with his name. I didn't answer. He called again at 7:03, at 7:21, at 7:44. By 1 p.m., he had called 49 times. I answered on call 50. David, what the hell are you doing? His voice wasn't smooth anymore. It cracked. Terminating a lease. I own the Scarborough property. You rent it. I'm ending that arrangement. You can't do this. Actually, I can. Check the lease agreement. Either party can terminate with 60 days notice. You taught me that when you tried to terminate me with your 90-day sale notice. The deal collapses without that kitchen. The buyer won't purchase a restaurant group without integrated prep infrastructure. Then I guess you have a problem, I said. David, please, be reasonable. Reasonable? I felt 40 years of suppressed anger rise. From a man who tried to steal my life's work for 12%? Here's reasonable, Jonathan. We split everything 50 over 50 like the original partnership agreement states. You get $8 million. I get $8 million. We both walk away clean. That's insane. I built this company's reputation. You stood on my recipes and convinced yourself you were a chef, I interrupted. Without my food, my training, my quality control, you'd still be sweet-talking investors with nothing to show them. I'll fight the eviction. You won't win. It's my property, paid from my personal mortgage. I'll fight your lawsuit. With what money? You don't have $8 million lying around. You need this sale to close, which means you need me. Silence. I could hear him breathing, calculating. What do you want? He finally asked. What I've always deserved. Equal partnership, equal recognition, equal payout. And I want you to stand in front of the staff at a meeting and tell the truth about who created the food that made Westbrook and Hayes possible. You're destroying 40 years of partnership over ego." "No," I said. "You destroyed it when you decided I was disposable. I'm just making sure everyone knows what you tried to do." He hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, Jonathan tried everything. He sent lawyers, he sent our accountant. He even sent Michelle Park, who apologized profusely for the retirement gift situation, said it had been Jonathan's idea, that she'd argued against it. I appreciated her honesty, but I didn't budge. On January 7, Robert called me. The buyer pulled out. "Deal's dead." "Good," I said. Jonathan's lawyer contacted me. He wants to negotiate a settlement. Tell him I'm available tomorrow. We met at Robert's office on January 8. Jonathan looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. The confidence was gone. His lawyer laid out terms. 50/50 split of everything. Restaurant group to be dissolved and assets sold separately if we couldn't find another buyer willing to work with the partnership dispute. And a written acknowledgement that I had been equal partner and chief creative officer from day one. "There's one more thing," I said. Jonathan looked up. "The Lion trip, the $85,000 travel package. I want you to cancel it and donate that money to the George Brown College Culinary Scholarship Fund, in both our names." His jaw clenched. "That's petty." "No," I said, "it's appropriate. That trip represented what you thought this was about. Status, recognition, being celebrated while someone else did the work. But the best thing we ever did was learn from people who actually cared about the craft. So take your trophy and turn it into something that matters." He stared at me. Then, incredibly, he laughed. Not a happy laugh. The laugh of someone who just realized how thoroughly they'd lost. "You know what, David? Fine. You win." "This isn't about winning," I said. "This is about recognizing the truth." We signed the dissolution papers on the 12th of February 2025. The restaurant group's assets were sold in pieces, some to competitors, some to former sous chefs starting their own places. The Scarborough kitchen I kept, and I leased it to 3 young culinary school graduates at rates they could actually afford. Jonathan and I each walked away with $7.8 million after legal fees and taxes. The day the money transferred, Catherine and I sat at our kitchen table, the same one we'd bought at IKEA in 1986 because it was all we could afford, and we just looked at each other. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We do what we should have done years ago," I said. "We live." We bought a small place in Prince Edward County. Nothing extravagant. Just a cottage where I can grow herbs and tomatoes, and the air doesn't smell like fryer grease. I teach cooking classes twice a week at the community center, showing people that good food doesn't require fancy techniques, just care and attention. Jonathan moved to Vancouver. I heard he's consulting for restaurant startups. I hope he's happy. I genuinely do, because I spent too many years being angry, and anger is exhausting. But sometimes, when I'm at Tim Hortons, the same booth where this all started to unravel, I think about that retirement party, about that Swiss chalet gift card, about how close I came to letting someone erase not just my ownership, but my dignity. And I think about those phone calls. Jonathan called me 50 times during those 2 weeks I held the eviction notice. 50 times. His voice getting more desperate with each message, more willing to negotiate, more ready to finally see me as equal. By the time he made call 50, I had already decided. The partnership was over. The trust was gone. You can't build anything lasting on a foundation of betrayal and erasure. So I didn't answer calls 1 through 49. I let them ring, and when I finally answered number 50, it wasn't to gloat. It was to state my terms. That moment, hearing the desperation in his voice, knowing I held the leverage for once, it wasn't sweet revenge. It was simply balance being restored. Because it meant I had finally reclaimed what he tried to take. Not the money, not the ownership percentage, but the fundamental truth that I had created something real, something that fed people, something that trained a generation of chefs, something that mattered beyond profit margins and media coverage. And no one could erase that truth. Not even a man who spent 40 years trying. The snow is falling in Prince Edward County this February. I watch it from my porch, coffee in hand, and I think about all those years. The early mornings prepping mise en place, the late nights perfecting recipes, the sacrifices Catherine and I made so two culinary students could chase a dream. We built something, Jonathan and I. That's true. But I was the kitchen. I was the craft. I was the reason people came back. And kitchens don't forget their importance, their value, their essential role. When someone tries to build an empire on your work while pretending you don't exist, that's when you remind them what happens when the kitchen walks away. Everything stops. No food, no reputation, no sale. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what needed to happen so something better could be built. Something honest, something true, something worth more than all the first-class trips in the world.